OWCS may be on mid-season hiatus, but that hasn't stopped teams as well as organizations from making massive moves in one way or another to prepare themselves for the second half of the season, as well as Faceit League and Esports World Cup happening next month. We've seen some significant roster changes across some of the more relevant teams in all three main regions, and on top of it all, some more positive vibes for the general Overwatch esports scene, thanks to some big-name orgs either coming back or joining for the first time. There's been a lot of craziness lately, so let's catch up. Based off the thumbnail and the title, you should probably know where we're going to start. That's right, Fearless is back, competing in professional Overwatch after temporarily retiring a couple of months ago, and he'll be joining the FTG squad, which got 3rd place in Overwatch Korea Stage 1. Honestly, it's just great in every way you can imagine. Fearless is a great competitor, one of the most legendary tank players of all time, and he's joining one of the better teams out there. He could be the guy to bump them up to that level that can maybe help them compete with the likes of Falcons or Crazy Raccoon. We've already seen them get somewhat close in the past against those guys, so now, with another expert player like this in their field, another solid tank player that gives them more flexibility and star power, you never know what their limit might be. But on top of it all, he's also one of the most loved players in the history of the game. Everybody wanted to see this guy come back. It was sad when we found out about his retirement, so just knowing that we get him at least for a little bit longer is really great. But that's not all the news that FTG has to offer, as they got picked up by an org. Finally, one of the top teams in OWCS is no longer homeless. They are going to be welcomed in by Zeta Division, and that will be their new alias moving forward. Zeta is a massive Japanese esports organization, and it's great to see them come along. It's great to see, in general, all the love that Japan is giving for Overwatch. They're bringing in a lot of new followers to help this game thrive and survive, so shout out to them for picking up FTG. It's great to see yet another elite team be represented deservingly by a big name org. But oh boy, this is far from the only team that gets a shiny new coat of paint, as we're gonna see Yeti, while we're on the topic of Korea, get picked up by Fnatic with some additional roster changes as well. We're gonna see Yeti, I guess now technically Fnatic, drop Irony and Bliss, unfortunately, in favor of Leejaegon and Izayaki, and they're gonna add in Checkmate and Attack to give them some extra versatility at DPS and tank. It's a little unfortunate that at least for now, Bliss and Irony's opportunity with this team comes to an end, as they are a very young backline with a lot of potential. But at the end of the day, Fnatic needed to get a little bit better if they truly want to be a threatening team moving forward, both for the Esports World Cup and for the second half of OWCS. This team was consistently solid in Korea during Stage 1. They were very easily the number 4 team, but it kind of felt like they were stuck in purgatory, as outside of a couple of big wins here and there, they usually could not beat those top teams. It felt like they were still a tier or 2 below those guys, and when those moments happen, you've got to make some kind of change, as it does feel like you could potentially close the gap if you make the right move, just knowing some of the pieces you have in place and how hungry they are to improve and get better. And I think having Izayaki and Leejaegon on this team could be a pretty good start. Izayaki and Leejaegon are maybe a bit out of their primes compared to previous years, but they're still a very proven duo. We know what their ceiling is, we saw what they accomplished on Shanghai, and it feels like, on paper at least, they can provide more than what Bliss and Irony were able to do, just knowing the feats. They bring a bit of a needed veteran presence to the team in-game that wasn't really being provided before, and let's not forget that they played alongside coaches Fate and Fleta during the Shanghai days. The connection is very apparent there. Those two may have a better ability to understand what these coaches are looking for, what their philosophies and playstyles and whatnot. It makes a lot of sense to have them on here, as they're just going to understand the game plan, and they're going to help this team potentially improve if they can play at a level that we know they're capable of. Systematically, this makes a lot of sense, and I feel a similar way about Attack joining this team. Some of you may not be all that familiar with him, as he never actually played in the Overwatch League, outside of, I think, that one time when Contenders teams were allowed to play in 2023, but generally kind of stuck to Contenders, playing for some pretty significant orgs like O2 Blast and Element Mystic throughout the years. He brings a lot of off-tanks to the pool, which is something this team was obviously lacking greatly. No offense to Donghak, he played really good actually in Stage 1 of OWCS Korea, but obviously, knowing his hero pool, there's going to be limitations. There's gaps that need to be filled. There are things that Yeti just couldn't play that effectively, meaning they had to settle for things that just aren't as good, like always having to play the dive, breaking up the Rhine randomly. This just makes them a more balanced team. Attack is going to bring that aspect. It's going to give you more options. We see a lot of Sigma on certain maps. That's something he can do for you. Maybe he's even a better Mauga player for all we know. I really like the pickup. He's young, he has a lot of room to grow, and he's never played on a team quite like this. He's getting some big-time upgrades with the support around him, and in general, he might feel more confident as a player. He can unlock more of that potential. It's maybe not the flashiest pickup in the world, but it could make a hell of a difference if this team is able to click properly. As for Checkmate, maybe seems a little bit weird on paper, knowing that it's basically a third flex player joining the team, and that Viper and Knife were pretty solid overall, but Checkmate can help with the rotation a bit. There's going to be a couple of hero pool differences here and there. He also brings a lot of intangibles that are definitely going to be helpful. He makes a lot of big brain plays. We've seen it in the past. He's a former champion, and in general, he might be able to lead this team more in certain scenarios, in certain maps, just because of that experience. And it's nice to have that option available, even if you're not necessarily always going to play him. Oh, and shout out to Fnatic for coming back to Overwatch, by the way. It's been like 7 years since they've had a team, since they've competed in this esport, and they picked up one of the better rosters available, so shout out to them for coming back and believing that now is the right time to come back to Overwatch. And just to wrap up some Overwatch Asia news for you, Team Once Again, who unfortunately cannot compete in OWCS, but we will see them in the Esports World Cup, have been picked up by an org finally. We don't have to worry about that poor GM having to do all of this out of pocket anymore. They are officially sponsored by LGD Gaming. Again, big W for Overwatch Esports, and big W for the Hangzhou Spark guys, and Rush as well. It's going to be so cool to see them compete under an organization in the Esports World Cup next month. I can't wait to see what they bring to the table, and if they can come back with a vengeance or not, and win it all this time. Looking over at NA, there's one big move in particular that stands out. The number 2 team, M80, are having a significant roster overhaul going on, as they're going to say goodbye to Happy, Pelican, and Hawk. All 3 of them were supposedly going to retire. It seems that for now that's holding true for Hawk and Happy, but Pelican seems to have other thoughts in mind after tweeting that he doesn't think he's going to retire just yet, which might just mean that we see Pelican join Korea or transfer to another NA and or EMEA team. And thank God for that. After seeing what we did on M80 in NA, clearly this guy still is great and has at least some kind of drive to compete, so hopefully he finds a big team to join soon, and I'll keep you updated on when some kind of Pelican news drops. But in the place of Hawk, Pelican, and Happy will be Coluge, Spectra, and Tree. Not a horrible way to overhaul your roster at all. It doesn't look as sexy on paper compared to what you used to have, but there's some good pieces here for sure. Spectra and Tree is definitely a DPS line that can more than get you by. Spectra is excellent in his own right and was originally going to be on M80, much like we saw with Lyre before the whole roster debacle happened, so it's great to see him make his way back onto this team. He showed a lot of flashes on Toronto Defiant in 2023, and I believe under the right support system, he could thrive, especially in a weak region such as this one. But the real thing that people are on the lookout for is obviously Tree. One of the final NA phenoms out there. One of the last prodigies that we may ever see come out of this region for the foreseeable future. the 17-year-old hit scan god himself is finally making his way to the big stage after all these years. We've seen what he can do on Saints, he's been getting hyped up for years and years, and now he's got a great support system around him, and I just can't wait to see how much he can elevate his play and unleash his full potential now that he finally has a team like this around him. We can all agree that going from Pelican and Happy to this is a bit of a downgrade, but Spectra and Tree complement each other very well, and there's a lot of room for them to continue to improve and play out of their minds, and they're still going to make M80 a pretty formidable foe, so I like it. You're making do with some pretty good changes knowing the circumstances. Then there's the tank situation. M80 still want to go with one singular off-tank oriented player, going from Hawk to Coluge. Hawk decided now's the time to call it quits. He no longer sees a future in Overwatch, understandable, much respect to him, but in return Coluge is coming back. A guy who temporarily called it quits, seems like the fire, at least for now, is back, and he'll provide a similar skill level to Hawk. It seems like they're right around each other overall from recent years, so there shouldn't be that much of a drop-off for this team, maybe outside of some leadership qualities, but hopefully some other guys can step up into that role. M80 unfortunately got worse on paper, that's kind of how it goes when you lose people like Pelican and Happy, but from the grand scheme of it all, nothing really changes. They're never going to be a top team anyway. It still feels like they're probably the number 2 team in NA regardless, so they'll probably still carry on and give us very similar results to what we've already seen. Now for some miscellaneous EMEA stuff that happened. Just a quick one for Ence, one of the top teams in EU of course, have picked up Mirror on the team. It's unclear what his role is going to be right now, unless they drop Chase. I don't know why he'd be playing tank. Maybe he's just generally going to be a flex player for this team. I don't really know what the case is there, but he's now on Ence. Something to note, I guess. But we also saw a lot of love from big organizations for some of these EMEA teams that haven't already been picked up by a major org, one of which is Ataraxia, who we've seen compete over the last couple of stages, getting picked up by Virtus Pro Gaming. Another major esports org joining in the fray, and generally, this team, if you haven't been keeping up, is pretty good on paper. You've got the likes of Canale and Gala as the backline. We saw what they did on Team Spain and on Ataraxia previously back in the day. Sauna, Cloud, and Shockwave was a pretty awesome DPS line. You gotta like where this team is at. They genuinely might be competitive enough to be in that top 3 in EMEA, especially if Twisted Minds can't get it together. If you haven't been keeping up with Faceit League, this team went 13-2 during the regular season, and right now they're in the upper bracket semis of the Master League. Things look really good for them out there. I mean, Shockwave and Sauna, those guys have been looking for a home for a while post-OWL, so it seems like things are really coming together for those boys, and their confidence is at an all-time high with how they've been performing, with how competitive they've looked against the league's best, not to mention they have a big name org backing them up as well. Things are looking great for these guys, they're on the up, and they're people we've got to look out for. But Ataraxia was not the only EMEA team to get some serious love from a major organization. Team Peps are also now sponsored by Gaimin Gladiators. This org's a Canadian one, and they too are joining in professional Overwatch for the very first time, and this is one of the better teams that was available, especially if you're looking for a Western team. Peps showed a lot of promise in EMEA Stage 2. They're showing a bunch of improvements as a team. It seems like they finally have the right roster in place after some experimentation, and they too are doing pretty damn good in the Faceit League right now. And that is going to get me into my final point of this video. Generally, right now, you got to appreciate all the love going on for Overwatch esports. All of these significant esports indoor gaming orgs dipping their foot into the water for the first time, or coming back for the first time in years. It's fantastic. It's just a great way to have some positive vibes for once after all of the misery and all of the horrible news we've gone through for years and years and years now. For a while, all we heard is no one wants to be involved with professional Overwatch. It's horrible. It's on the decline. But now it feels like we're starting to go up a little bit. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of experimentation. Success here is of the utmost importance if we want to continue to go down that trend. But right now it seems like a domino effect is going off. After we saw NRG make their grand return, picking up students of the game, it has set off this crazy chain reaction, and now suddenly everybody wants to be involved again. And even if it's just for the time being, that feels really nice. It's just great to see the support from so many different places in the world too. NA, EU, Japan, and the love they've been bringing, the massive audience as well. We're still waiting on Korea, which is a bit unfortunate, and it's an important next step, but at least we're taking some kind of step in a right direction rather than a wrong one. After it seemed like we were dead and no one wanted us at all, now it seems like as we head into OWCS finals later this year, as well as the Esports World Cup, that most teams that make it there are probably going to be represented by an org, and I think that's pretty cool. It doesn't mean we're saved or anything and that things will get even better from here. There's still a lot of flaws within our system, a lot of changes that need to be made for everybody to be happy and for this to be a truly successful product, but you gotta start somewhere, and this is the right kind of step you need to take to achieve those goals. So at the end of the day, we should celebrate what has happened recently and just hope for the best. That's all I have for you in the news for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to give it a like and subscribe if you did, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.